Every hour of your life has 60 minutes. Every minute has 60 seconds. Every circle you draw has 360 degrees.
You didn't choose those numbers. Someone chose them for you, roughly 5,000 years ago.
They even invented beer and dedicated a goddess to it. They called themselves the black-headed people. How did they conquer nature? How did they invent medicine before Hippocrates? What did archaeologists find in Sumerian burial sites?
This is the extraordinary story of how a culture born in clay and reeds created the blueprint for the entire modern world, and then vanished so completely that for 4,000 years, no one even knew they had existed. To understand the Sumerians, you must first understand the land that made them, southern Mesopotamia. The territory between the Tigris and the Euphrates is not a place that invites settlement.
Summer temperatures are extreme. Rainfall is scarce and unpredictable. When it does rain, it crashes down in a wall of water, floods the plain, and vanishes, leaving cracked, dry earth behind. The two rivers, for all their life-giving power, are dangerously volatile.
Unlike the Nile, whose floods arrive on schedule, the Tigris and Euphrates surge without warning.
They change course. They swallow fields. They erase entire villages in a single season. The land swings between drought and catastrophic flood, a cycle so brutal that the Sumerians wove it into their deepest mythology.
In their telling, the gods once sent a great flood to destroy all of humanity. Only one man survived.
Utnapishtim, by building a boat and loading it with the seed of every living thing. Thousands of years later, that story would resurface.
But beneath this hostility lay extraordinary potential. Over millennia, the rivers had deposited deeply.
The soil of southern Mesopotamia was among the most productive on Earth, if, and only if, water could be controlled.
And this single condition, the need to master water, would alter the trajectory of all human civilization.
Before the Sumerians arrived, the region was already inhabited. An earlier people, known to archaeologists as the mud brick temples and farming settlements across the plain. They left behind painted pottery, simple shrines, and a network of small villages. But they did not build cities. They did not write. They did not organize themselves into anything remotely resembling a state. Then, sometime near the end of the 4th millennium BC, a new group appeared. We do not know where they came from. Their language, Sumerian, is unlike any other language on Earth. It has no known relatives. Linguists call it a language isolate, a tongue that stands alone. Clues buried in their vocabulary hint at outside origins. The names of their own rivers, Tigris and Euphrates, are not Sumerian words. Neither are the names of their greatest cities. Even the words for basic farming activities, plow, farmer, to sow, were borrowed from another language. Someone was here before them.
The Sumerians adopted the land, its tools, and its place names, and then transformed everything.
According to their own myths, they came from a paradise island called Dilmun, identified by some scholars as modern-day Bahrain. Whether this was literal history or a founding myth, we may never know. What we do know is that once they arrived, southern Mesopotamia was never the same.
The Sumerians' first and most consequential innovation was not a tool or a technology. It was a decision to reorganize the landscape on a scale no human society had ever attempted. To survive in southern Mesopotamia, you had to cut canals across miles of terrain. You had to build embankments to contain the spring floods.
You had to dredge silt from waterways, season after season, and you had to do all of this, not as a family, not as a village.
The irrigation systems the Sumerians constructed were colossal. A single city-state managed an agricultural zone crisscrossed by canals, dotted with reservoirs and covered in carefully watered fields. And those systems required constant, back-breaking maintenance. Miss one season of dredging, and the canals would silt up. Miss one season of repairs, and the embankments would collapse. The rivers did not forgive negligence. This is the hidden engine behind the birth of cities. Not ambition, not invention, necessity. When survival depends on a system this large and this fragile, someone has to organize it. Someone has to assign labor. Someone has to measure water, schedule maintenance, resolve disputes between upstream and downstream villages. From this necessity, a new class of authority emerged. At the center of every Sumerian city stood a massive structure, the ziggurat, a stepped temple tower, rising above the flat plain like a man-made mountain. The ziggurat was not merely a place of worship.
It was the administrative heart of the city. It functioned simultaneously as a temple, a granary, The priests who managed the ziggurat controlled the land, the water, the surplus grain, and the labor schedules. They set prices, they collected taxes, they distributed rations. In the eyes of the Sumerians, all land belonged to the gods. The priests merely administered it on their behalf. By around 3800 BC, the village was no longer. The city had arrived. The greatest of these was Uruk. At its height, between 40,000 and 80,000 people lived.
For creatures that had lived in groups of 20 or 30 for hundreds of thousands of years, this density was unprecedented. In a village, life was governed by familiarity. You knew every face, every family, every dispute.
Social order could no longer rest on personal relationships. It required institutions, and institutions require records. In a village, you can remember who owes what to whom. In a city of 50,000, you cannot. The birth of writing was not inspired by poetry or prayer. It was inspired by accounting. The earliest known written records, clay tablets from the city of Uruk, dating to around 3300 BC,
they are inventories, tax records, wage ledgers, lists of sheep, barley, and units of labor. Writing began as bureaucracy. Before these tablets, the Sumerians used a simpler system, small clay tokens, a cone for 1 unit of grain.
Each token represented a quantity. Hundreds of these tokens have been found across the ancient Near East. But as Uruk's economy grew more complex, storing thousands of physical tokens became unwieldy.
Temple officials made a decisive leap. Instead of keeping the tokens themselves, they began pressing them into soft clay to record the information. The physical object was replaced by its image. Representation was born. From there, evolution accelerated. The pressed token marks became simplified drawings, pictograms. A picture of a head meant head. A picture of a bowl meant food. At first, the system was vast and clumsy. Over 2,000 separate signs, each representing a concrete object. But over centuries, the Sumerians discovered something that would transform not just their own civilization, but all of human communication. Symbols could represent sounds. The Sumerian word for arrow was T. It had a specific written sign. But once the system shifted toward phonetics, that same sign could be used wherever the sound T appeared, regardless of meaning. Suddenly, it was possible to write full sentences. Grammar, abstraction, nuance. The complexity of spoken language could now be captured in clay. Suddenly, it was possible to write full sentences. Grammar, abstraction, nuance. The complexity of spoken language could now be captured in clay. From the Latin cuneus, meaning wedge, it became the dominant writing system of the ancient Near East for over 3,000 years, adopted by the Akkadians, Babylonians, Assyrians, Hittites, and dozens of other cultures. Some of the latest known cuneiform texts date to the 1st century AD. This means cuneiform was in use for over 3,000 consecutive years, twice as long as the entire span from the fall of Rome to the present day. And clay, it turns out, was an ideal medium. Unlike papyrus, which decays, unlike parchment, which burns, clay, when fired, even accidentally in the blazes that destroyed the very cities where it was stored, becomes nearly indestructible.
More than 1 million cuneiform tablets have been recovered. Archaeologists are still finding them. They tell us more about daily life in the 3rd millennium BC than we know about most of medieval Europe.
With the advent of writing, debts, taxes, and obligations ceased to be oral agreements. They became fixed. They could not be forgotten, denied, or retold differently.
For the first time, a system could remember more than any person.
And hold everyone accountable by record, not by memory. The Sumerians did not merely invent writing.
They produced an astonishing volume of innovations, many of which are so deeply embedded in our daily lives that we have forgotten where they came from. They produced an astonishing volume of innovations, many of which are so deeply embedded in our daily lives that we have forgotten where they came from. Instead of using all 10 fingers, the Sumerians counted the 12 segments, the phalanges, on one hand, while using the 5 fingers of the other to track groups of 12. 5 times 12 equals 60. From this simple gesture, counting on their fingers, they built a mathematical system that still governs your day.
24 hours twice 12, 60 minutes in an hour, 60 seconds in a minute, 360 degrees in a circle.
Every time you glance at a clock, check a compass, or measure an angle, all of it traces back to a Sumerian scribe pressing marks into clay. Their mathematics extended far beyond counting. They could solve quadratic equations. They calculated the area of triangles and the volume of cubes.
They understood the relationship between the sides of a right triangle, a principle we now call the Pythagorean theorem.
More than 1,000 years before Pythagoras was born, they invented the plow, which revolutionized farming by allowing fewer people to produce more food, freeing labor for craftsmanship, trade, and administration. They invented the wheel, first as rollers for heavy objects,
then as mounted wheels with axles, then as chariots. Though their chariots were pulled by donkeys rather than horses, the principle was established. Rotary motion could multiply human power. They were the first to build with arches and columns. They invented the sailboat, turning rivers from obstacles into highways.
They created the first known legal codes, centuries older than the famous Code of Hammurabi, covering property, trade, marriage, inheritance, and criminal offenses. And then there was beer, covering property, trade, marriage, inheritance, and criminal offenses. And then there was beer,
consumed through long reed straws from large communal jars. Beer was not a luxury. It was a dietary staple, and likely safer than city water, since the brewing process involved boiling. They even had a goddess dedicated to it,
Ninkasi, whose name translates as the lady who fills the mouth. The hymn to Ninkasi, written around 1800 BC,
praising the processes of malting, mashing, and fermentation in poetic verse. They invented soap, mixing animal fat with lye.
They created the first schools, where students, mostly boys from elite families, studied reading, writing, mathematics, astronomy, law, and literature. Education is not a modern invention, it is a Sumerian one. And when the people who invented writing encountered disease, they did what they knew best, recorded the symptoms on clay, and began looking for patterns. When a Sumerian fell ill, 2 people came to see them. The first was called the Asu, a practicing physician. He examined the body, checked the pulse, measured temperature, studied the color of the skin and urine.
He prescribed herbal salves, compresses of oil and thyme, tinctures dissolved in beer and honey.
The oldest medical tablet in the world, a clay slab from Nippur, dating to roughly 2200 BC, contains 15 specific prescriptions.
Pulverize branches of the thorn plant, pour diluted beer over it, rub with vegetable oil, and fasten the paste over the sick spot as a poultice.
2,000 years before Hippocrates. The second was called the Ashipu, an exorcist, because for the Sumerians, illness had a dual nature. Yes, it had physical symptoms, fever, pain, swelling. But behind every symptom lay a cause, and a demon had entered the body, or an angry god had sent punishment for a sin. The task of the Ashipu was to determine which demon or god was responsible, and banish it through incantations, amulets, and rituals. What is remarkable is that both systems operated in parallel, and neither was considered inferior to the other. The Asu treated the body, the Ashipu treated the cause. This was not a contradiction for the Sumerian mind. The physical world and the spiritual world were a single fabric. To treat the body without addressing the spirit would have been as strange as treating a fever while ignoring the wound that caused it. The Sumerians did not conquer the future with armies. They conquered it with ideas. And ideas, unlike empires, do not fall.